Alright. So Vercel actually just released their, not just released, but they released it in June 15, which is about 3 months ago, and released their AI SDK, meaning that actually Vercel has taken AI in their priority, and right now they are releasing a lot of new products that help developers and enable developers to build AI applications more easily. So today I'm going to show you how we can build this ChatGPT clone in less than 60 lines of code. It's amazing. So we can see that, let's say we ask, explain the JavaScript events loop to me. So we can see that we got the ChatGPT logo here, and it functions exactly like ChatGPT. We can see that there's a streaming output, right? We can see that it's slowly streaming back, and all of this is gonna run on deployed on Vercel on the edge environment. So the edge environment is an alternative environment than Node.js. So usually we would run our Next.js code on Node.js, which will allow us to bundle in a lot of code. However, the Node.js environment is actually very heavy because you have all these packages. Therefore, the Node.js environment is slower compared to this new edge environment. So this edge runtime allows the environment to be run with less dependencies. So it only allows essential web APIs like the fetch API, the request and response APIs. But on this edge runtime, since that there is less packages that is required on the runtime, it allows the runtime to run more efficiently and faster. So you can see that it actually provides us with built-in LLM adapters like OpenAI. It also gives us streaming first UI, so it allows us to create that nice streaming UI. And also it gives us like callbacks so that we can save the chats to our database through a very simple API provided by their SDK. And of course, it's edge and serverless ready. So the edge runtime will allow for the package and your application to run much faster. So let us actually begin coding this out. It's going to be a really quick build. It's only 60 lines of code, but I'll walk you through everything here. So the first thing here is, let us open our terminal. Alright, once we're in our terminal, let us do npx create next app. So we'll be using Next.js for this application. So let us just name it Vercel GPT clone. Okay, and we'll be choosing ENSLint, TailwindCSS, source directory, and just leave everything as the default. So we'll be using Next.js 13's app router for this application. Okay, now that it's done, let's open up in VS Code by doing cd Vercel. What do we call it just now? We called it Vercel GPT clone, and let's open up in VS Code by typing the code.command. Let me zoom in a little bit. Okay, so let us just do npm run dev, so to make sure that the Next.js application is up and running. So let me just go back to our browser and let's go to localhost 3000 so that we can see that the Next.js is running well. Okay, that's good. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down to our page.tsx in our source/app, and I'm going to just clear out the entire function here. So I'm going to just return a normal h1 that says hello world, and let's give it some styling to make sure that TailwindCSS is working. Text rate of 6500. Let's save it and let's come back here. So now we know that the Tailwind is working, so that's good. So let me come back to our globals.css. I'm just going to remove everything other than the base Tailwind utilities here, so that we start off with a blank white slate. Okay, so the first step here is to actually install the Vercel AI SDK, and it's a really simple command. It's just npm install AI. So they managed to get the AI namespace in npm, so it's just a very easy term to remember, npm install AI. So with this AI SDK, it provides us with a lot of front-end features and also back-end LLM adapters to create the UI. So first, what we're gonna do here is I'm going to come down to my front end. Right, everything is gonna be in this home page. So the first thing I'll mark it as use client. So this is gonna be a client component, and we'll be doing the whole component here. Okay, so to begin, I'm gonna first come down here into my app directory. I'm gonna create a folder called API, and inside here I'm gonna create another folder called chat. Under the chat, we'll call it a root.ts. So this is the app directory way of saying that this will be living on a REST endpoint called /API/chat. So it corresponds to the file structure here. So if you have a /API/chat and a special root.ts file, this will be mapped to this API. So this root will be a special root, meaning that our front end is going to hit this endpoint to get back the streaming response from OpenAI. So we're gonna first configure OpenAI. So I'm gonna do config. Right, this is gonna be a new configuration. So let's import the configuration from OpenAI. So let's import a few things. So for now, we need another package called install OpenAI-H. So this OpenAI-H will basically is another version of OpenAI package, whereas it is Edge compatible. So OpenAI by default uses the Axios package, which is not compatible on the Edge runtime, but this OpenAI Edge uses the fetch, which is included in the Edge runtime. So we can use this OpenAI Edge to interact with our OpenAI models. So the first thing is I'm gonna import a few things from the OpenAI Edge. So we're gonna need the configuration object, and we also need the OpenAI API here. So let us configure it by creating a new configuration. Inside here, I'll need to pass in my API key. So how do I actually get this API key? Let's come back to our browser and let us come to OpenAI API key. So search for OpenAI API key. Come down to your OpenAI API. So just log into the console and come down to the API section, and finally under the menu here you can press view API keys, and let's just create a new secret key. So I'm gonna press new secret key. I'm gonna call it Vercel AI SDK. So create a new secret key, and then we can just copy the secret key here, and I'm gonna paste it into a new environmental file. So come down to the base directory, the root directory, and create a new .env, and let's just paste it in here, and let us name it OpenAI key, right? So this has to match whatever you wrote in here, right? So let's just do process.env.openai key. Okay, so with OpenAI key and OpenAI key. So now let's save this file and let us save it. So now that we have provided it with the OpenAI API key, let us now continue. So we have already given it the open. So we'll do const OpenAI equals to new OpenAI API, and we'll pass in the configuration object. Now here we can actually start writing the code. So we're going to export a async function called post. So this is going to map to a post request to this endpoint here. So we'll be later on our front end, we're going to be making the post request back to this endpoint to get the response from GPT. So this is going to accept a request parameter, right? This request parameter is, so the first thing here is let us actually extract out the body. Const body equals to await request.json. Okay, so with this request.json, we can actually destructure a message array from the body. So this message is going to be passed from the front end. So this message is a list of messages from our front end here. So we can see that in our app, we can see that each line here is a message. So no matter whether it's from the user or from ChatGPT itself. Okay, so now that we have this message, we're gonna ask OpenAI for the streaming chat completion. Okay, I'm gonna do const response equals to await OpenAI, right, dot create chat completion. We're gonna pass in three things here. We're gonna pass in the model. So we can see that the model, you can choose it, but I'm gonna choose just GPT-3.5-turbo. So this is a very fast model, but it's still incredibly efficient and capable. Then we're gonna pass in the messages. So these messages comes from the body here, messages. And lastly, we need to tell it that we actually want to set the streaming option to be true. So streaming meaning that instead of me sending a request and then wait for OpenAI to slowly generate everything and then pass the whole block back to me, it's gonna just give me back each token one by one. So as it's generating, we can see the cool streaming effect as the text slowly comes in, and we can add it to our front end. So that's what the streaming is for. Lastly, let's import two things from the AI library. So import from AI. So this is from the actual Vercel AI SDK. So let us import two things. First is OpenAI stream, and second is the streaming text response. So this OpenAI stream will create the stream from this response, and then this streaming text response is a utility function so that we can connect the backend to the front end and create the streaming effect. So I'm gonna do const stream equals to OpenAI stream and pass in the response. So this creates the actual stream. Now to send this stream back to the front end, we can just do return new streaming text response and pass in the stream here. And that's all that you need, right? So that's all that you need, and we can save this file. And the last thing here is actually we want to add one more thing. So in here we can just export a const runtime equals to edge. So this is a special variable exported out of your root.ts. If Vercel detects that you put edge, when you deploy it, it's gonna run on the edge runtime, which will make this much faster. So let's save this and come back to our front-end page.tsx. Okay, so the first thing here is I'm going to import one simple function from the AI library. So I'm going to import from AI/React. So we can see that AI give us a few libraries like Solid, Svelte, and even Vue. But in this case, we're using React. And all we need is one function called useChat. So this useChat is going to interact with our backend and actually gives us all the message and the streaming effects. Okay, so come down here to your component, and we're going to destructure a few things from this useChat hook. Okay, so this useChat hook, we can see that it returns us with a lot of different things. But the main thing is we need these messages. So these messages is going to give us the list of all the messages like here, and we're going to basically loop through it on the front end, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here, so we can see that if we come up to just streaming first UI helpers, we can see that it's destructuring the message from useChat. So we get these messages, which is all the messages that is passed in through this list. So then we can just loop through the messages, be it the user or the system, and then we can just loop through it and display it on the front end. So for now, I'm going to just display a very crude front end with a div, and I'm going to loop through the messages. So I'm going to do messages.map. So for each message, let us inspect what the message contains. So we can see that message, if we do control space, we can see there's some IntelliSense. We get the content of the message, we get the ID and the name and the row. So this row is actually special. This row is, you can see that is either assistant, function, system, or user. So based on whether it's assistant row or the user row, we can display different front end, different styling for the messages. So for now, I'm just gonna return a normal span that says I'm gonna show the message.row and I'm gonna show the message.content. Okay, and I'm gonna pass in a key prop to message.id. So I'm gonna save it. So I'm gonna come back to my front end, right? So let me just walk you through. So what we did was we're looping through the message. For each message, we are storing a span, and we're gonna show the message row and the content. And this row can either be the assistant or the actual user. So let me just come back here, and right now we can see that there is no message here. How do we create the input to actually pass in our input back to the backend? And actually, the AI SDK, this useChat, actually gives us the function to do so. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna have another input down here. So I'm gonna have an input, right? And I'm gonna give you a placeholder of say enter a message. Right, I'm gonna save it. Right, we've got this input. Come back to my thing, and now right here we got our import box here. So useChat also gives us two more things. It gives us the input variable. It gives us the input variable and also provides us with the handle input change. So this input and handle input change is responsible for controlling the local state of the input component here. So I'm gonna pass in the value to be this value. So this value, remember, comes from this input, right? Input, and then I'm gonna do on change. So whenever we type in this input, we're gonna call this handle input change. So I'm gonna paste it in here and save it. All right. And one more thing here is the last thing it gives us is a handle submit property. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna wrap this whole thing in a form, wrap this input in a form, and then I'm gonna pass the on submit prop to be the handle submit. I'm gonna save it. So all we're doing is we are creating a form with input in it that says enter a message, and we just basically gives control to the AI SDK so that whenever we change the input or submit the form, it's gonna handle it for us. And believe it or not, that's all the code that is needed to actually render the ChatGPT function. So let's just enter a message like, what is your name? If I press it, we can see that user pops up, and slowly we can see that the assistant with the AI model comes back. So right now it's not properly styled, but we can see that it's actually working. So instead of a span here, what if I put it in a div, right? And then we can see that we have a line here, assistant here. So I'm gonna keep entering like explain JS to me. And you can see that that's all that is needed to create the streaming effect, right? And all of this is all handled by a Vercel SDK. We just need to destructure some functions, bind our input, and loop through the messages. And all we can see that it has handled everything for us. So what's left now is purely let's style it properly. So I'm going to do the styling with you guys. So all I need to do is for here, let us just delete everything for now. I'm going to redo everything. So now we got the idea of how these four functions work. Let us do, for the wrapping div, let's give it a class name of padding top of 4 and padding bottom of 32. Then within this div, let us map through the messages. So for each message, right, what what I'm gonna do is for each message, I'm gonna do an implicit return. I'm gonna return a new div, and this div will have a key of message.id. Okay, and this div is going to have a class name of border dash t border dash black divide by 10, so 10% opacity, and then that's it. I'm gonna save it. Okay, then within this div, right, I'm gonna just showcase another div here, and within here, let us actually put a message. So I'm gonna do a span that puts the message.content. So I'm gonna save it first. So right now it still looks a bit crude, right? So we got some border here. Okay, so within the inner div, let's give it a class name of max width of 3XL, margin X of auto, padding Y of 6, and flex. Save it. So now we can see that it looks more similar to GPT with it centered in the middle. Alright, so now one more thing is within this span, let's give you a class name of just margin left of 3. Right, so later we're gonna add a logo here for the ChatGPT AI. Then coming out of this div, let's create a new form, right? And input inside here. So this form, I'm gonna give you a class name of fixed inset-x-0 and bottom-10, right? Then within this input, let us give it the placeholder of send a message, and we'll bind the functions that's passed back to us from the use chat function. So on submit, we're gonna pass in the handle submit, right? Then for this input, the value will be the input from use chat, and the on change will be the handle change. Handle input change. So everything's still the same. So now we have a little nicer styling. So we can see that now there's an input box here. So let's style the input box here. Okay. So for the input, it's gonna be a long class name, max width of 3XL. We want to have a shadow of XL, width of full, margin X of auto, padding Y of 8, flex, height of 10, rounded medium, a border, and the border input, and lastly we want the BG of background, padding X of 3, text dash SM, we want a ring dash offset dash background, right? And let's save it. So right now if you come back here, we have a nicer text input form. Okay, so right now we can see that it's basically done. So I'm gonna try sending a message. So explain the events loop. So if we press that, we can see that AI is responding it to us. So let me just add one more icon here. So we can see that in the original build there's a ChatGPT icon. So all I did was I went to the ChatGPT website and I just copied their image here and just pasted it in. Okay, so for that I'm gonna come back to our code, and for that I'm gonna just come down to my for the logo. I'm gonna come down to my app. I'm gonna create a folder called components. Within it, I'm gonna put GPT logo.tsx. So I'm gonna create the logo itself, and I'm gonna just paste in the logo. So this is what this SVG here, you can see we got this div and the SVG. This is just what is copied from the ChatGPT website. So I'll leave a link for this logo down in the description, but this is purely for styling purposes. So let's save it and let's come back to our page.tsx. So let's add one more thing. So we noticed that in the actual app, when the AI is responding, there's a darker background and there's a logo. So let's add that. So let's add the darker background first. So for this div, this outer wrapping div, let's make it into a template string, and let us just check. So if the message dot row equals to the assistant, right? So if the is assistant, that means is the AI responding. Then in that case, we'll add a BG gray of 50. So if we save that, now we can see that there's a darker gray when it's the AI speaking. And one more thing here is I'm gonna add here just below the div and above the span. I'm gonna check if message.row equals to assistant. Once again, I'm gonna just show the GPT logo here. So if I save it, finally we can see that there's a GPT logo showing up and everything looks perfect. So I'm gonna show you how to deploy this now. So what you want to do is come down to your git ignore, and just add the .env. So we don't want to push our env variable into our git repository. So after you have done that, open up your terminal. So let me just stop everything here. I'm gonna do git add dot. So I'm gonna add everything, then git commit -am, initial commit. Then finally, I'm gonna come down to my browser and go to github.com/new. So let's create a new repository. So name it whatever you want. I'm gonna name it Vercel AI ChatGPT. So then you can just name it whatever you want and create the repository. All we need to do is follow the instructions. So we have already committed. So let us rename the branch to main. Okay, let's rename the branch to main. And then let us add the origin. So add the origin, and lastly we can just do git push -u origin main. So this will push up the code to the GitHub repository. Now we can then give this repository to Vercel, and Vercel will deploy it for us. So come down to vercel.com, okay, and come down here and add a new project. And then let us choose our newest project called Vercel AI ChatGPT. So you can name it whatever you want, right? So for this, we need to pass in the environmental variables. So these variables is mainly just the GPT key, right? So let's come down to our .env. And what you need to do is just copy this whole file. So press Command A or Control A, then press just copy it, come back here and just paste it in. So then you will observe your keys, and all you need to do now is press deploy. So it's gonna deploy the API. So right now we can see that here we have a chat root, right? And because we have specified this runtime to be edge runtime, it's gonna be super fast when we're using the application. So let's wait for it to deploy. So it's gonna be building the project, and after it has built and installed everything, I'm gonna come back to you. Right, so we can see that once it has been built out, we can see that under this, beside this /API/chat, there's this epsilon logo, and this epsilon logo basically says that it is a streaming server, streaming endpoint. So with that, everything is deployed. Congratulations. So let's press continue dashboard, and then we can view the domain. So I'm gonna press here, and we can see that the Vercel AI ChatGPT has been deployed, and in just a few simple steps, you can see that we have built the whole ChatGPT from scratch. Not from scratch, but with the help of the AI Vercel SDK. So everything works, is deployed. You can then share this to your friends and actually use it yourself. So do you see how powerful this use chat feature, this Vercel AI SDK is? With just these few simple functions and the edge runtime support, we are able to build super fast applications powered by AI. And we can see that this file only took 32 lines, right? With all the lines and all the default imports, 32 lines, plus our chat root that cost 26 lines. So in total, this was only about 50-ish, 60 lines. So in just 60 lines of code, we're able to build out this entire GPT clone. So one more thing I want to showcase is I've actually been learning how to use the AI SDK, and I've actually built out this entire platform. So it's a SaaS product, a full stack SaaS product that allows you to chat with your PDF. So it's all powered, the authentication is powered by Clerk, and how it works is all you need to do is you select a PDF. So let's say I select my resume here. It's gonna upload to Amazon S3, so we can see the progress bar loading, and then it's gonna vectorize the PDF. So after uploading the file, you can see how fast it is, and then we have brought to a platform where we are able to view the PDF and ask it a question about the PDF itself. So this is really amazing. We can ask, where did he intern at? So if we send that, we can see that it's using the Vercel AI SDK to read in the information from the PDF, right? We can see that this is true. I did intern at this company called Relevate, right? And then it's able to respond with us with the context of the PDF. So I'm going to be uploading this build and doing the recording of this tutorial soon, and it should be up by next week. So this is just a sneak peek and preview and how much I'm going to teach you more about the AI SDK and how to use LangChain with OpenAI to basically tie up this entire Pinecone DB and all that amazing stuff, AI stuff, in a single tutorial. So I hope you are as excited about this build as me, and if this is done, I'll link it up here, and I hope I see you in this next tutorial video. Thank you so much.